Can everyone hear me? Great, it's so wonderful to be here with all of you today. My name is Jill Grana. I'm the Director of Academic Programs at Meridian International Center. And we are so pleased and thankful to Virginia Commonwealth University to be hosting a special event for all of us today. We want to say thank you to VCU, as well as, of course, the State Department, who made this SUSI program possible. I'm going to turn things over to my colleague Monica, who you all, I'm sure, know at this point from Facebook and Twitter, who's going to just give you a few instructions about today, and then we're going to go ahead and introduce Governor Wilder. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. How are you guys? And hi, VCU.
Hi.
I just want to do some quick introductions around the room. If you want to wave when I mention you so everybody knows which camera you're on, okay? So in Virginia, we have VCU Cote d'Ivoire, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Malawi. And then we have at George Mason University. Where's George Mason? There we go. We have Kazakhstan, Libya, and Mongolia. And from Southern Illinois, oh, thank you guys. Hi. From Southern Illinois, we have Bangladesh, Burma, and Nepal. Thank you all for joining us. We're so excited to meet you all, even virtually. We'll see you soon. SAUC, I'll see you on Monday, I think, and GMU next Wednesday. So I'm very excited to be able to start to put some faces with your names very shortly. While we're listening to Governor Wilder speak today, please remember to post questions, keep track of your questions throughout. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A at the very end. We're probably going to do a couple of live questions, but we want to collect your questions on Facebook and Twitter. If you're tweeting, please use hashtag StudyUS. It's the same hashtag we have you using throughout the whole program. I do want to pause for a quick minute and pop over to our folks at Meridian. Right there we have Emma and Graham. Graham's working on your bulletin, and you'll be getting tons of yearbook emails and messages from him. And Emma is our second set of hands for the summer. And we'll also be joined by Ty shortly as well, so you'll see him in the background. I think that's it. All right, so we'll toss it over and look forward to hearing your questions at the end of the program.
Okay, all right.
Do you want to go grab him? Or are you going to get him after you make the introduction?
What do you guys want to do? I'll introduce him and let someone else grab him. I'm here to talk, not grab.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody out there. Raise a hand because it's weird to me that you're there, but I'm here. So, yeah, that works for mental high five to everyone. There you go. Hi, my name is Chris Saladino. I'm an assistant professor of political science here at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I'm one of the co-instructors for our group here at VCU this summer. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has made this possible for us here at VCU. Thus far, this is a pretty amazing experience. And it looks to continue to get better and better, so we're very excited about it. Thank you all, to all the students, to all the people who facilitated it, and to everybody out there, and we'll see you all in Washington, D.C., I guess, later on this summer. Second, I'm really here just to introduce your speaker today, and it's a privilege for me to do that, but it's more of a privilege for you to hear the speaker, so I'll keep my remarks very brief. Doug Wilder is currently, he's a faculty member here in the L. Douglas Wilder School of Government Public Affairs. He's a faculty member in his own school, which is a pretty distinguished occurrence that most people don't see in their own life. Doug Wilder is a native Richmonder. He served in the Korean War. He was a decorated veteran of the Korean War. Attended Howard University Law School, was a distinguished attorney here in the city of Richmond. And in 1969, Doug Wilder was selected to be a state senator here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. First African-American state senator selected in the Commonwealth of Virginia since Reconstruction. That would seem like a very distinguished moment in someone's career, but it's just the very beginning of Doug's political career. In 1985, Governor Wilder, not yet Governor Wilder, was elected to be Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. the first person to, African American to do so since Reconstruction, but more important, in 1989, he was elected to be the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Not just the first elected African American governor in the Commonwealth of Virginia since Reconstruction, but in the United States. Unfortunately, the Commonwealth of Virginia, or maybe he'll tell you fortunately, does not allow governors to serve consecutive terms, or maybe he would still be the governor. Maybe he'd be governor for all eternity. But instead, Governor Wilder went on to a career of political advising, of consultation, of really important commentary, not just here in the city of Richmond and not just in the state of Virginia, but across the nation. In 2004, he became the first elected mayor in the city of Richmond. Our mayors were selected through a council process, and in 2004, he became the first popularly elected mayor in the first year that was available, serving one term before we were lucky enough to have him around our building in a permanent way. We see him very often, where he teaches classes here in the School of Government and Public Affairs, in political science, and generally is an incredibly important person, not just to the faculty and the staff who deal with him, but especially to our students. And from that experience and from that position, you'll get to hear him talk today. I should be quiet and let him speak. He's way more important than me. It's my very, very great pleasure to introduce you all to Governor Doug Wilder.
Thank you. Professor Saladino has been a friend for a long time, and I've learned a great deal, and continue to listen to those people who know more than I do. And that hasn't always been the case. I used to run my mouth a lot saying things that I didn't really understand, but I protested. And I guess that's really how I got involved in politics in the first instance. I never really wanted to become involved in running for office or being elected to anything. But I always ran my mouth. I criticized everything. I fussed. I didn't like things. I argued. When I went to school here, in the elementary schools, I was always appreciative of great teachers. Segregated schools, but great teachers. All of the teachers were African American, principals were white, and the teachers never expected us to do anything but be the best and to exceed. And I was a very good student in elementary school, but I always talked a lot too. I would get 5 A's and 5 D's for demerits for talking, running my mouth. And that carried over to high school. When I got into high school, I wasn't as good a student because I started wanting to do other things. Athletically, I loved football. I wanted to play football. I didn't want to study. And I studied just enough to get by, which was good enough to get out of high school. And then when I got into college at Virginia Union University, short distance from here, this place, I didn't have counseling as to what I should be majoring in from any source. And so other people were saying, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a dentist. Well, I think I'll be a doctor. And so my major was biology. And I didn't like the teacher. So the next year I changed it to chemistry. Chemistry didn't like me. But I continued with it and got a degree in chemistry and couldn't find a job. I think about it quite frequently because when I went to apply for a job, it was a building that's on the Capitol grounds called the Old Finance Building. And when I went there, told the man I wanted a job. He said, okay, what are your qualifications? I said, well, I have a BS degree in chemistry. I think I may be able to do a few things. And at that time, you had job applications colored and white. That's the way they were advertised in the newspaper. And so he looked through the list and said, I don't think I see too much there for you. He said, but I do have something that could be pretty good. It's a county of about 5 or 10 miles away from Richmond, maybe about 10 or 15 miles really. It's Hanover County, and they have a training school for boys up there. He said, they need a cook. I said, but I'm a chemist. I don't know anything about cooking. He said, you can learn. Now that building is located right next to the governor's mansion. They call it Old Finance Building, Chris. And I used to come out of the governor's mansion some mornings and look over at that building. I said, oh, so I finally found a job. But when I came back from military service, I was drafted and went to Korea. Something that I didn't really want to do. And yet I found myself fighting in Korea for the rights of Koreans to be free when we were not experiencing those same freedoms and rights here in America. And it bothered me a great deal. And when I read, many of you have relatives perhaps who've been exposed to combat and war. When I read about some of the people coming back from Vietnam and tensions that they have undergone even there from Iraq and from Afghanistan, they are not new tensions. My brother was in World War II. He's 10 years older than I. When I came back from Korea, I was really just bombed out. I hated the world. I didn't want to be involved in anything further. I didn't want to do anything. And stayed around the house. My mother was indulgent. My father wasn't so much so, but she pretty much at that time ran the house. I didn't want a job, so I, for a short while, carried mail. I didn't even want that job. But my brother-in-laws were mail carriers, and they said, well, you got to do something. All right. So I did that for a short while, and then ultimately did get a job as they called it the field of toxicology in the state medical examiner's office. So my job was to run all the blood alcohol tests for drunk driving and to look at the forensics with reference to toxicology. If someone died, we needed to find out what they died from. They died in a fire, were they actually dead from carbon monoxide poisoning, or were they killed and then thrown into the fire? If they died in water, were they dead from drowning, or were they actually thrown into the pool? So I did that for a couple of years, and then in 1954, Brown versus Board of Education decision was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, and it said that the nation had been wrong since 1898, when the Plessy versus Ferguson decision decided that separate but equal was not the law, and that the discrimination based on race was wrong. I couldn't believe it. And I'm working now in the chief medical examiner's office. I said, boy, 9 white men had finally decided that something was wrong, that this has to change. And I'm tired of hearing chemistry. I said, I gotta get out of this. I gotta go into law. As it turned out, the chief medical examiner in the state of Virginia, in addition to being a doctor, was also a lawyer. He finished the University of Saskatchewan in Canada. And he encouraged me. He said, well, if you're going to go into law, I gotta do something. I just can't stay in this field because I don't see any heights. Good job, make a good living, raise a family. But it wasn't what I really wanted to do, and as it turned out, I always was geared toward the social side of life anyway, in terms of the societal problems and the issues. That's why I ran my mouth. That's why I argued. That's why I fought. And so I eventually decided to go to law school. And even though Brown versus Board of Education came down, getting into a white law school in Virginia would have been extremely difficult. So I went on to Howard University in Washington, D.C. and studied law. When I came back out of Howard, I decided to set up a law practice. And I knew that rather than to try to go into somebody's firm and work, I needed to have my own because I needed to practice law my way. So I did set up my own office in the East End of Richmond, which had never had a law office before. And people said, well, they've never had one before. I said, they're going to have one now. You're not going to make it. I said, I understand. I'm going to put it there. And I did. And it was very successful in terms of people knew me from that area. And then people, the word spread. So in terms of making it relative to law, I was doing quite well. Got married, children, and they were doing very well. I was able not only to do well for myself, but my wife didn't have to work, and the children were doing well in school. And so I was enjoying the practice of law, and I was doing trial work, criminal, and I had some of the most interesting cases. I had the first case that, and it came from someone having taken the heart out of a man and put it in somebody else. And my case led to what was called the first legal definition of death, brain death. Prior to that time, it was all of the vital organs, breathing and resuscitation efforts to revive that pulse beat. So I had that case. Won it for a short while and then lost it on appeal. I had any numbers of other criminal cases. I had a case in which a man came into a courtroom, didn't even know the judge, had no beef with the judge. He had a shotgun under his raincoat, just took it and shot the judge, killed him. Hit the sheriff, shot him, shot the bailiff or two. And I tried that case, and actually, for the period I tried it, was able to at least get a hung jury for a long period of time, and then they moved the jurisdiction of the case to another place, and ultimately the man was found guilty. He's still in. The man was just awful, just awful. But still, that wasn't enough for my yearning in terms of doing things that I wanted to do relative to being involved. So I started saying, well, you know, I want to get into the political arena, but I don't want to be there directly, so I'll help some other people. So I started, and I worked on a guy's campaign for running for city council. He came in next to the last person. I felt good about that. And I worked on another guy's campaign for the state legislature. He didn't do quite so well, but I had a taste of it. And so then I started saying to friends particularly, I think I'm going to run for the state senate. They've not had anybody in that body but for the 2-year period of Reconstruction. And I'm going to run. And they told me that you can't do it because they, well, I said they hadn't had anybody. They hadn't had anybody of color. And so they said, I don't think you can win it. I said, no, I understand, but I'm going to run. But I don't think you're going to make it. I said, I understand that too. But I think I can. I don't see why you're doing it. I said, well, would you vote for me? I said, yes. I said, well, just still be quiet. And let me do it. And I did, and was successful. And then I stayed there for some while, and I was able to become involved with other kinds of things, seeing how I had very little experience with reference to what the state senate did, Chris. I had never even gone to a committee meeting to see the members in the committee. I had never seen the body collaboratively addressing issues. But I'd been going by what I read, what I saw. So when I got down in the Senate, I found out how actually dumb I was. Wow, I don't know what's going on. And so I had a desk mate, a real dear friend of mine, Bill Rawlings, Bill Rawlings from Southampton, Virginia. Southampton, interesting places where the slave revolt by Nat Turner took place. And he was very helpful to me. He said, this is wrong, this is wrong. And he said, you shouldn't vote this way. And maybe you want to consider voting this way. And that helped me so much, and I started getting involved, forming friends like that, and I got into a position where I ultimately became chairman of several committees. And I actually became the chairman of the committee that would assign other senators to committees. So, which means if you wanted to be on the finance committee, which is always running everything, you had to go through Little Douglas, I used to call myself. And so that means something when you're in a position to stop or help other people. And that's what really politics is, the name of give and take. It's not all one way, never. And it took me years to do that. It took me years to understand. It took me 8 years to get the Martin Luther King bill passed here. 8 years. I get it passed in the House, then the Senate would kill it. I get it passed in the House, I get it passed in the Senate, the House would kill it. I get it passed in the Senate and the House, the governor would veto it. I do that same process again, went on and on. People say, you're not going to get that passed. I said, well, you watch. So we did get it passed. And it was those types of things that caused me to know that not only was Virginia changing, but the nation was changing. My election wasn't just a thing on me, it was a thing on attitudes of people and how they were in the process of change. That's why I was never surprised with Obama being elected, with his opportunities to be elected. And the question isn't why, the question is why not? And so when the opportunities came for me to offer for lieutenant governor, the first time someone asked me about that, I described it as a very vacuous position. I said, first of all, the lieutenant governor only has 2 jobs, two duties in that job. One, he presides over the Senate. Secondly, he votes in the case of a tie. Now, I'm chairman of any numbers of committees in the Senate. Why would I give up this authority to run for this vacuous position? That was in 1977. In 1985, when I was running, somebody said, you remember Wilder when you said about running for this vacuous position? Well, but it's a stepping stone. And I thought at that time that for an African American to be elected governor, there had to have been some entrance level at a state level to show that the people could and would get behind you. Virginia has the smallest number of African American residents of any of the southern states. So people, when I was running, they thought there were this great number of African Americans elected. Chris can tell you that the voting strength of African Americans is no more than about 15% in the whole state, which means I had to appeal to 85% of the other people. And when I decided to do that, running for the lieutenant governor's position, I decided to go around the entire state. At the time, the state was about 6.5 million people. It's about close to 8 million now. And so I've been in the Senate for 16 years. I felt it was time to either move up or out. I didn't want to spend all my life there. But if I can't go up, out. I don't want to be a politician for life. And so people said I couldn't make it again. Well, you know, you hear so much of it because then it starts falling on deaf ears. But when I went out to the areas of the state telling the people I wanted to run, I thought I had a pretty good record. I thought that people pretty much knew it. But that was in the Richmond area. People had no idea who I was outside. I'd go outside to, even Roanoke, Chris, I would say I'm Doug Wilder. They say, so what? I would say I'm running for lieutenant governor. Okay, tell me about yourself. Well, I thought you might know a little bit about it. They didn't. But what I decided to do was spend 30 straight days just traveling to every city and every independent city and every county in Virginia. And I wouldn't come off the road, 30 straight days. And I wouldn't take a big army of people with me. I only had, my entire staff was 3 people. One of them was my nephew, who was driving a vehicle that we had borrowed. And everybody thought it was the dumbest thing in the world because they said I needed to be back here raising money. stupid to be going out there with those people. And by those people, you know what they meant. They meant that you might never be seen again. And they misunderstood those people. I've always thought that those people, if given an opportunity to know, would do the kinds of things that other people would do. And so it's a resentful thing for people to put others down to the extent that you judge them by the way they look, the way they talk, the way they dress, and the way history has regarded them. Well, I was fortunate enough to have won the lieutenant governor's position. Now, as you heard me say, why do you run for that? Only one thing you're going to do is what? You're going up. Next thing to do is run for governor. Well, then people thought I was crazy before. They knew then that I was certifiably insane. Run for governor of where? Virginia? Poor boys had it. Take them on off someplace. Well, as it turned out, I was fortunate enough to have done that, gotten elected in that regard, and then the unfortunate thing was I'd made all these promises. You elect me, I'm this, that, and the other, this for that, do this for the other. And I found out we were broke. The state didn't have any money. So I said, well, no, this is not what I've been reading. But we have some money. And so I went to talk with my predecessor in office, and he said, well, we're not going to leave you broke. And it's good to know that. But I'm not going to leave you what I thought we could leave you. And what is that? You only have about a $35 million surplus. Say $50 billion biennial budget. $35 million. Well, didn't even have that. So the first week or so, or the month or so when I was in office, I had to scale back and I said, we don't have this money. As it turned out, what was supposed to have been a surplus of any sort turned out to be about a $2 billion shortfall. I told all these lies to these people. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that together. So a lot of people then say, you got to raise taxes. I said, well, no, run on that. And so rather than to do that, I decided we would streamline, we would deal with what I call efficiencies and effectiveness. And then we would deal with funding the necessities, not the niceties. In other words, if you gotta have this fine, you need, it's a difference between want, need, and bound to have. And so I said, this is what we're gonna do. Ultimately, we were able to weather the storm, didn't raise taxes, settled most things. Then we were able to get the largest bond proposition Virginia had at any time, putting money out for mental health, money for education, money for roads, money for acquisition of park space, and some of the programs that we had intended to do. One of the things I also wanted to do was make certain that government didn't look like it used to look before. There had been some incremental changes as it related to inclusion, but I wanted to put more women, more minorities, more African Americans on every board, every commission, in the cabinet to the extent possible, not based on their color, based on qualification. And I never had any criticism from anyone in terms of saying that I was stacking the positions because they were qualified. The first treasurer was African American. The first person to head the pension fund, which was now about $70 billion, African American woman. But these people were qualified. And so to that extent, and the governor of Virginia is a very powerful constitutional office, as Chris will tell you, mainly because of the numbers of appointments that a person makes, about 4,000 appointments, which extrapolate and go over from one term to another, so that those people will be there even far longer than the governor. We were fortunate enough to be able to do that. And yet, to establish what I'm most proud of is what we call the rainy day fund. It's a reserve fund. in which I said, even though we don't have the money now, I don't want other governors to have to go through what I went through. So we're going to establish a reserve fund, and I want to put $200 million in that before we do anything else. And they knew I was crazy. 200 million when you don't have anything. So we found it by eliminating duplicate offices, by cutting back on things that were not effective. Fortunately, we also were able to convince the legislature to put that reserve fund into the state constitution, which means it is mandated that there be a reserve set aside in Virginia at all times for funding the government necessities. In addition to that, you can only go into that reserve fund once every budget cycle. You can't just keep dipping into it. And when funds start coming back to the general fund, you have an obligation legally to restore it and to put that money back. Other governors have been able to dip into it. And I don't criticize them for it. I wish I had an opportunity to dip into it. But those are the kinds of things that I have the most proud of relative to how to improve upon government. And as Chris indicated, Governor of Virginia is a 4-year term. And primarily because it is a very powerful office, the legislature would say, look, we can't afford to have a guy stay here, a guy or a gal, stay here for 8 years. And to make all these appointments for 8 years, to extrapolate not just 4 years, but 16 perhaps. And so you might reach some rapprochement if you had some of that authority and appointment ceded to the legislature. And I think they might eventually get to that, Chris, but I think it's a little still a ways off. The last thing, when I left office, I left with the intention of being finished with politics. But as Chris indicated, there was an effort to change the way the mayor is selected in Richmond. And we took that responsibility to see that it would be changed, and it had to be approved by the Voting Rights Act. It had to be approved by the Justice Department. They did approve it, and it was never within the intention that I be the mayor. No, I didn't want that. And but many of the people who helped in the process, particularly in the business section, they said, well, we want you to do it. Be the first one. I said, well, no, I'm not going to promise you that. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. Give me a couple of weeks and we're going to find the right person. 2 weeks came by and they came back and said, all right, where's the person? I said, I haven't gotten that person yet. But and one of the persons I had in mind didn't live in Virginia. The other person that lived in a position he was getting ready to assume he couldn't take it. And they didn't have anybody to offer. They said, you're going to have to do it. I said, well, no, they said, your time is up. So that was it. And, but having since left that, I've been fortunate enough to see the city grow and the process continue for the betterment. As Chris has said, the 2008 election, I was one of the first persons to believe and state pretty much openly that Barack Obama could be elected president. And when you look at it, why not? If I could get elected governor in Virginia, obviously I'm seeing things through a different prism. I'm seeing things that others may not have been able to see. He saw it, and he and I chatted about it on any number of occasions. And America is moving toward a different era. I was reading something before I came in here, speaking about the strength of the United States Supreme Court and how it's moving to this direction. All of that is what I call temporal, because the people are always ahead of the politicians. Never forget that. People are smarter than the politicians. They don't ever put it together to the extent of it coming out in one voice. but they're smarter. They know more. They're involved more. They're at the ground level with the issues. But they sometimes are so divided in expressing it that it's taking advantage of. I always listen to the people rather than other things, because that's where the strength is. One example of it, when I was mayor, a guy came up to me and said, you know, you're talking about crime and what's going on, people who are wanted. I said, why don't you put the pictures of the most wanted on the buses? Everybody rides the buses in those areas, they know these people. Great idea. He said, what do you think of it? Fine. I ran it by the chief of police. He said, great idea. We put it on the bus. We picked up a bunch of those same people within a month's time. Another example, a guy said, you're trying to find all these drug dealers that hanging out in these neighborhoods. He said, well, okay, you come by, you make your drug bust, but you're not doing it right. What do you mean we're not doing it right? He said, when you come and make your sweep through, bring your Department of Public Works along at the same time and go through the trash in the backyards so you can pick up the garbage cans and everything where the stash is, where everything is out there. Said, do it contemporaneously. We did that contemporaneously, and you'd be surprised at the numbers of people you got. Now, people say, well, Wilder did a great job. Wilder didn't do the job. These ideas came from people out on the street. And the same thing with what you see taking place in America today. Don't think for a moment that we are in tough times or bad times. Times have never been better for America. Now, there never have been any good old days for everybody. We are a growing nation, growing to the extent of fulfilling the creed that many thought would be and should be. We've come from a few to many. We've come from the isolation of sections of the state, of the country, and to the pluralism of expression. And we've come to an understanding that we really are one world. We no longer look at other nations of the world as being foreign, because we're all together. And we have disparate origins, but intricate involvement. So much so that there's very, very little difference between what all of us want for the betterment of ourselves, for our communities, and for our societies. And so to that extent, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of government to bring some of that about, but our work is still undone. There's young people like yourselves who need to pick up that cudgel, continuous, and cut away at that morass of the differences out there to make certain that we can achieve. Thank all of you. Good to be with you, and I'll answer any questions if you might have some.
Maybe we'll start with VCU, and then we'll head off into the other universities and come back to our Meridian team with a Facebook or Twitter question. Okay? Go for it. Chris. Can you give your name just so everybody can hear you?
Yes, I'm Christina Julme from Haiti.
From where?
Haiti. Haiti. They call it Haiti.
I'm with you.
So I think for all here, you are such an inspiration, and for the one also on the screen. But I think especially for the one for the Africans and for the African descendants, you're just a light. Thank you a lot. My question is about the period that you won for Senate. You talk about 2 years of reconstruction. So can you tell a little bit about that period? Oh, it was?
Frustration when?
Reconstruction.
Right.
Yes, can you tell us about this period, please?
Yes. What happened in this country right after the Civil War, there was instituted what was called the laws of Reconstruction to rebuild the South and to bring about some degree of parity. That's the unfortunate thing that happened with Lincoln's death, because when Lincoln was killed, his attitudes about it were more continuous. Never was interested in punishing the South or even taking properties away from them, but bring about a reconciliation, and at the same time making certain that voting rights were extended to Africans, making certain that everybody had the right to vote. And so during that period of time, there were those voting rights extended. There were opportunities for people to be elected. And they were elected to the state legislature. They were elected to the Senate. They were elected to the House. Not just in Virginia, but all over the country, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. And great strides were made. And then with the death of Lincoln, the assassination of Lincoln, and then with the ultimate secession by Johnson, the vice president, and the relaxation of Reconstruction and the withdrawal of the federal troops from those areas, the protection that the federal troops were there to protect people relative to voting and everything else. Once those things were removed, then the efforts toward Reconstruction ceased and stopped. And then that allowed various state legislatures to institute their own laws and to put in their, what they call their black codes, their levels of denial. You can only vote if your grandfather could vote. How is that so? My grandfather couldn't vote. We know that. And then the poll tax to charge people to vote. Then what they call blank paper registration. To be able to vote, you'd have to, the registrar could give you a piece of blank paper and said, tell me what the Second Amendment to the Constitution is. He didn't know either. But it was those types of laws that then came into place that stopped it. Consequently, that period of Reconstruction ended, supplanted by other laws. Chris, you want to add to that?
No. No, I'm enjoying listening. I have to be honest.
But I mean, but would that be an accurate?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, the list, the litany of what came in, you could talk about for the rest of the day, and they would still ask the questions.
But see what happened? You wouldn't believe it.
In every possible way, you undercut what the federal government had achieved and what the war had achieved by really deconstructing Reconstruction.
Then the Hayes-Tilden Compromise with the various people of the presidency. Something people don't recognize also, slavery was not just in the South. You had New York, you had Massachusetts, you had other places. And so slavery was about money. The war was about money. The South felt denied. And so once that period of Reconstruction ended, that stopped any people from being elected, not just in the state legislatures, but at local government levels as well. It's good. And so that's why with the Met, you look at what just took place this week related to the Voting Rights Act. Well, it's just sickening. One of the most surprising things about that, and Chris will know, he probably had his mouth drop open too, when he read in the Richmond Times-Dispatch editorial this week, they accused the court of judicial activism in doing this. This paper, you couldn't believe it, because they'd always been supportive of those types of action because it was one of the more conservative newspapers in the country. But when you get a paper like the Richmond Times-Dispatch editorial to be even mildly critical of something like getting rid of the voting rights, and so people will say, well, we don't need it anymore. Why don't you think you need it? Before I came in here today, I was thinking about having a test case myself, and I am going to do it the next time I vote. I went to vote here. Most of the VCU students vote right here down at Main Street Station. I'm sorry, Main Library. I used to vote at Main Street Station. They changed their voting place to the Main Library. So I went there last time, knew what I had to do, pulled up my driver's license, had it in front of me. Everybody was hollering, "Get down, man." Fine, hello. They knew who I was. You know, I'm standing there. Gave the lady my driver's license. Said, "Here's my driver's license." And, well, where do you live? I live 301 Virginia Street. Such and such a that. Kept going and asked me some more questions. I said, you know, this is the reason that people are upset with the voting process. When you make it so deliberatively slow, when you create impediments where none should be, you're not assisting, you're obstructing. So what I decided I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it the very next time I vote, I'm going to show my driver's license, tell them where I live, and that's it. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to alert the media to be there. And then I'm going to say, now that is all I'm going to tell you. If you want to deny me the right to vote, do it.
That's what it is.
Huh?
That's what it is.
Well, you're the first person who heard it. And y'all, because I just decided to do that. Because it doesn't make any sense. Go ahead.
All right, how about someone from GMU? Do we have any questions? There's one on Facebook too. I think, anyone from GMU?
Yes.
Okay, speak nice and loud. Can't hear. Can you move a little closer to the microphone? Thank you, sorry.
I can hear you.
Okay, please. And but you better know that you have not actually voted for the but my question you have voted and I'm sure that
You got it?
Christine, can you say nice and loud for us?
yes, the question was, what do you think about the U.S. federal policy on the issue of China and Taiwan?
Thank you. Wow, it's a heavy question.
I don't mind it. It's the issue of the U.S.-China policy is interesting. It goes back a number of years. Quemoy and Matsu, the two islands that were patrolled for the most part by the U.S. and the government of Taiwan used to be Formosa when the Japanese had it. When World War II was over, retaken, China renamed it Taiwan. Jimmy Carter's administration was the one that started the process by saying, first of all, it belongs to these islands are not going to be fought over. And the interesting thing as it relates to Taiwan and China is they love each other more so than you would think. They're crazy about each other. One of our good friends who calls to our ports in Virginia, the Evergreen Shippers, he comes rather frequently. 65% of their business is with China. Taiwan. And we overplay that. They have an exchange, the families go back and forth to each other. I think what has happened in a number of times, there were some in this country that felt that could be divisions played relative to China, communism and other forms of government. That's not going to affect anybody at all anymore. And I think the more important thing with reference to China and Taiwan is the economics, the money. How will that play out? I don't know that they'll be unifying anytime too soon, but I wouldn't be surprised in the eventual future that might happen. I predict that is going to happen in South and North Korea. Those are people likewise who, they like each other. It's the leaders that keep them apart. And so I think you're going to be finding that type of thing taking place. The governments in Taiwan and China will be separate. The economic interest might eventually be the same at one time.
Thank you. How about SIUC? Let's bring it back to domestic politics for this conversation. Anyone from SIUC?
Keep going.
Duck down a little bit.
Keep going.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
And special thanks to Mr. Wilder for such a great presentation. I am Sweta and I'm from Nepal, and my question is specifically about the compulsory school attendance law that you're sponsoring for the Tism. My question is, despite the law was ensured, do you think that specific measures were needed to ensure the education disparity and compulsory school attendance?
If they push me, it's going to take care of it on theirs.
Primary education, so that will ensure education disparity does not happen to the club. So my question is related to very specifically about education disparity budget.
Well, thank you. I think I understood you. When I first got into the legislature, I found out that the compulsory school attendance laws had been taken off of the books. Particularly, they were taken off of the books because of integration. When Brown versus School Board of Education decision came about in '54, Virginia adopted a statute saying kids don't have to any longer go to school. And so I didn't know that. When I would go to my law office, I'd see all these kids out. I was coming from court, and I'd go into my law office around 11 or 12, and I said, "What are all these students out in the street? Is it a holiday?" No, they didn't have to go to school. Why? Because there's no law against it, or for it. So I put that bill in, and fortunately it was passed. We made specific religious exemptions. My nephew now is, well, I think he still is, just a few days later, maybe, is deputy secretary in the Obama administration to Duncan out of Chicago, out of Illinois, rather. And they've traveled the world relative to what's necessary in education. I believe that education should always continue to be local. That is, I don't think that the federal government should tell Alabama, any more so than Virginia or Massachusetts, how to educate its children. But I do think that monies ought to be made available on an equal basis to the extent that they are constitutional as it relates to making certain that monies are not denied the less affluent areas. One of the real problems that we're having, though, is control. Who makes the decisions at these levels? And Virginia was the last state to have what you call elected school boards. Sometimes heretofore, school boards all were appointed. I have gone along with it. I still think it's good. But I think that there ought to be some people who could be appointed. I like a mixture, Chris. I think you should have elected school board, but I think you need to have some people appointed. What? Appointed with some idea about finances, some idea about governance, or how to spend, what to spend on curriculum, how to deal with making certain there's a measurability of accountability. We've gone, unfortunately, from a nation that taught Latin and Greek in high school to now teaching remedial English in college. Not any progress, is it? And so to the extent that we need to measure the production, to measure and also to make certain that those who are responsible for education, and it's not all just a matter of money. I can tell you from experience that they used to complain a great deal in Richmond when I was mayor, even before I was mayor, that well, we need to spend more money on education. I said, we spend $72 million more in Richmond than the state average. They didn't know that. Oh, we didn't know that. Somebody, even the kids would sometimes say, we need to have the same types of money spent on us that they spend on the counties, like in Henrico and Chesterfield. I said, did you understand, or do you know that we do spend more per capita on our students here than there? They didn't know it. And so the question then is, we need to measure what we mean by education. Do we mean how much we put out for education, or how much do we put in the classroom? Do we measure the quality of the courses that are being taught, the STEM courses, science, technology, engineering, mathematics? They should be so essential that no one should be permitted to graduate in the absence of understanding the mother tongue and being able to master some of the necessary things to move you ahead. I may have touched upon an answer to your question. I hope I did.
We have one question on Facebook. Yeah, I think Meridian's going to pull some for us. So Emma, Graham, or Ty, you want to throw a Facebook or Twitter question at us?
Yeah, hold on one second. Graham with a question from Twitter.
Hi, hi everybody. This question, Governor, comes from Dina Oscarova studying at George Mason right now. And the question is, which authors influenced you the most in your career? Which authors or different works of literature influenced you the most?
I've always been impressed with Emerson, self-reliance, but I can also find relevance in people like Melville and something like Moby Dick. It might sound crazy, but what it shows is that these were people who, I was saying, it's that individual spirit that motivates and moves. When I read Richard Wright's Native Son, I couldn't understand it because it, to me, appeared to be too condescending. And though Jefferson's words never were intended for me, when I first read of and heard the words to the Declaration of Independence, I was so impressed, and I used to recite them. And I used to say to my mother, all men are created equal, they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, boom, boom, boom. Does that mean me? She says, absolutely. It means you. Well, now that's put into my head as a child. It never left me. And so it's that type of thing. I liked Emerson because in addition to the self-reliance aspects, he was saying to some people on some occasions that you got to look to yourself. I like Alexander Pope a great deal. Second essay on mankind, know them thyself. Presume that God to scan the proper study of mankind is man. And so there are a few of the people that I'd like to read about.
And I think, hold on, Ty, 1 second, we have you muted. Can we unmute them? Okay, go for it, Ty.
This is another question from Twitter, from Khadija Ali. She's studying at George Mason. Who inspired you to challenge the prejudices and stereotypes perceived by society towards African Americans?
My mother. My mother was the greatest source of inspiration that I've ever had. And my father's parents were slaves, and yet he wouldn't ever talk too much about it. He thought he would do his by example, and he always would vote, pay his poll taxes. He was the youngest in his family. My mother's family were free people. She was educated in, she was born in Virginia, Charles City, Virginia, but she got her high school education ultimately in New Jersey. So when she came back here to live, and my father took advantage of her and married her, she was a sharp tongue, and her thing would be that you need to be the best at what you can be. She was master of the English. She could master a New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle and would be mad if she missed a word. And I couldn't get through a piece of it. But she and I would have our debates all the time about words, about literature, about reading. And her thing would be to me was, don't argue about where you are. Insist on yourself being better than the situation. For instance, when we would get who gave up so much, W.E.B. Du Bois, who showed the need for collaboration, founding the NAACP, and then obviously people like Thurgood Marshall and ultimately Spofford Robinson, who found out that it wasn't a question of arguing about, fussing about things, but putting it together and doing things and doing something. But first of all of that is underscored by education. If you don't have education, there is no key to unlock anything. So that's pretty much it.
I think we're going to pull probably 2 or 3 more questions. We're going to pull them right from Facebook and Twitter. So if you have a question, either grab a laptop next to you and plug it in. But that way we'll just keep those questions going right through the social media piece, okay? So Emma, back to you guys.
Okay, this question is from Axel at GNU. She asked, when you were running for the election in 1990, what was the main issue for you, and what did you want to change first in Virginia?
Well, young people. I wanted to set example for them being able to get the education. A lot of stress was on education, a lot of stress was on making certain people were available to get jobs. One of the things I really wanted to do was to improve upon some of the things that had been started. 2 of my predecessors had helped in that regard. Chuck Robb had been very good in opening up the doors of government to other people that had heretofore been denied, putting people in his cabinet for the first time, and appointing people to positions in board and commissions. I wanted to expand on that. But I also wanted to give people second chances, like some people who dropped out of education, give them a chance to reconnect, to get back in. I don't care how old you are, but to have the state to be in a position to assist. I wanted also to look at doing more for mental health and making certain we could make more resources there. And I guess the underlying theme was to make certain that Virginia was open for government at all levels for all people, and to do that.
Meridian, back to you.
Okay, Governor, this question is from Amanda at VCU. And she's asking about your experience as a Korean War veteran and how being a veteran impacted your performance as governor.
Well, I hope it didn't hurt me too badly. The experience, I was very bitter when I came back from Korea. I was very bitter. But when I went into the Army, that was my first real experience to live with white people and to talk with white people and to know them. And surely I'd known white people. You can't escape that. But when you're living in the same quarters, when you're eating from the same mess plate, when you're fighting together, you're dying together, you're wounding together, you really come to see how silly issues of color are, and how crazy it is to look at somebody and think that that's a difference. And so the bitterness subsided a great deal, as I said, by Brown versus Board of Education. The more important thing it did for me was to teach me a greater discipline, to teach me likewise the line of authority and respect. If you're called upon to do something, you do it. If people are asked to do something, or you have the responsibility to ask your chief of this agency or head of this department to do something, it gave me the authority of discipline that I would not have had, and to understand the line of respect that goes with that. In other words, if you were to tell me to do something, if you got people under you to do something, then if they're not doing it, it's your fault. And if you're not doing it, and I let you continue that, it's my fault. So it stopped me from, it helped me not pass the buck. In other words, the buck stops with the leader. And to the extent that that person knows how to dispatch that and to discharge that, it helps a great deal. Military, to the extent of recognizing there's certain things you do for yourself, and then when you do call upon others to do their job, if they don't do it, there must be consequences.
Do we have you for a few more questions,
Yes,
or are you getting exhausted?
Not bad.
Okay, great. Meridian, we got another one?
We do.
Great.
This is from Hyder from GMU. Governor Wilder, what would your opinion on this quote be? Arabs are the new African Americans.
What about
Arabs are the new African Americans.
What's your opinion on the quote, Arabs are the new African Americans?
I think you got to be very careful how you translate those, transfer those syllogisms, and for instance, give you another example, that the gay-lesbian argument now is the civil rights movement of the day. No. Everything stands on its own 2 feet. The African Americans, it's a different story, totally different story. The Arab situation is totally different. I had people so upset with me and mad with me when I was mayor. So I went over to the place on Brook Road, Chris, you know what I'm speaking about, to welcome Hannah Ashwari from Palestinian, she was a Palestinian legislator, renowned lady. They got angry with me because they said that she was divisive. She was not divisive. People have differences. You read in the paper this morning that Netanyahu is saying, you know, we need to sit down, we need to talk. I'm prepared to stay in a tent with John Kerry if he wants to pitch one until we come to some degree of understanding. 2 years ago, that wouldn't have been said. And so it's not a question of putting on somebody else's adornment or somebody else's title. Each tub stands on its own bar. And so I think the Arab situation is different. It should be addressed differently. I think minorities in this country, some have different approaches. American Indians are not minorities. They originate from the country. And yet their problems are different. Arab Americans are somewhat different. Asian Americans in many instances. We are eventually coming to be what we should be, and that is one nation. Without trying to put us in a melting pot, I don't believe in a colorblind society. Now, that sounds so bad to you. But why can't I look at you and see you as you are? And say, what difference it makes to what your color is, or what your texture of your hair is, or how you walk, or how you talk? You're human. And so to the extent that some people may have had some problem, no, Arab Americans were not put into chains in this country, nor forced to build a nation as we did in this country, nor being hacked and brutalized, and not told to walk on this side of the street. I could go into any numbers of travails, and yet Arabs have any numbers of tales they can tell that are bad, that are different. And so it's a question of them saying, as Lyndon Johnson would want them to say, come, let us reason together. We can think together without being the same. And we can share similarities as well as to understand how we can approach it. I think we are moving, as I said, to approaching and solving many of these problems. The most important thing is to put the problem out there to be discussed. That's why race needs to be discussed. Differences of religion need to be discussed. Differences in terms of origin need to be discussed, but they shouldn't be points of differentiation.
I think we have, we've gotten a few questions on social media from VCU and from GMU. SIUC, did I see somebody writing a question on the board?
No.
No? Are you guys good? All right, we'll go back to social media then. Emma?
Yep, so this is a Facebook question from Karuna at SIUC. She posted this on our Facebook group. She said this morning we learned about symbolic racism theory, or racism gone undercover, and she asks, how do you see the situation presenting itself in today's politics?
I guess the closest thing that could come to that is people would say that we're going past race in this country. We need not discuss that anymore. That's why I referenced earlier on, racism would be undercover if you don't want to discuss it. Does it exist? Yes. I don't think there are too many people who would not admit that. I have any numbers of white friends who say that to me. They say, look, don't you think for a moment, Doug, that is not out there. One of the things that you hear, particularly as it relates to the president, there are honest differences of opinion that people have relative to some of the positions that he takes. But a lot of it is geared toward race, and I don't think too many people would argue with that. So if you would consider that being undercover, then let's take the cover off it and put it out there. The question then would be, what is it that you think should be done to address the issue? So define the issue first, and then come to the solution if you can.
All right, I think we're gonna close it up there for now. We've cut Dr. Wilder for an hour and a half at this point. We want to thank you so much for speaking with our group today, and thank VCU once again for hosting. And we will have this video, so if you want to go back and rewatch it, listen to some of the answers to your questions again, we'll send out that link to you and let you know where that's going to be posted. I want to just quickly do a shout out. Today you all should have received your first weekly bulletin for the SUSI program. A big shout out to Emma and Graham on that one. And I quickly do want to introduce Ty. Ty, you want to wave real quick? There you go, there's Ty. Ty is currently working very hard on, with Emma, trying to find everybody Capitol Hill placements for when you come to DC, and for George Mason at the tail end of your DC program. So we really appreciated having Dr. Wilder here today, and being able to meet all of you and have you all participate. Please keep asking questions. We do have a little bit of time where we're going to keep that going. Tweet away, as Emma and Graham are telling me, hashtag StudyUS. Maybe I'm supposed to look at my phone.
Thank you.
Tweet. We really look forward to receiving all your pictures and watching you guys throughout the rest of your program. And thank you so much. Thank you.